The medical officer at Camp Concordia, Kansas, stands in the examination room holding an X-ray film up to the light. He does not speak for almost 20
Age and date
seconds.
of birth.
The nurse behind him shifts her weight and asks if
Religion.
something is wrong with the equipment.
Do you have any
Captain
allergies?
Howard Lynch shakes his head slowly
Very
and says
slowly
only
now.
one
Rotate your
sentence
head
that
to
will
the
echo
left,
through the
Carl.
decades to come. This boy should not be standing.
Maintain
The boy
that
in
posture.
question is 18 years old. German. According to the intake form, he walked off the transport truck without assistance less than 2 hours ago on this Thursday afternoon in late April of 1945. But the X-ray tells a different story. 3 vertebrae in his lower spine are compressed to the point of fracture. The bone tissue is visibly crushed. The surrounding area shows signs of chronic inflammation and microfractures that could only have developed over months, not days or weeks. Captain Lynch calls for the camp physician and the Red Cross liaison. What they are about to discover will force the United States War Department to open an investigation that reaches all the way back to a forced labor site in occupied Poland, a cattle car evacuation in January of 1945, and a 15-day march across frozen countryside where prisoners were beaten with rifle butts if they fell behind. But before we understand how this young man came to carry such damage in his spine, we need to understand something else, something that will matter far more than the medical details. We need to understand what happened when an 18-year-old boy who had been taught to hate America, who had been told Americans were cruel and decadent, walked into an American prisoner of war camp and discovered he had been lied to about everything. In the spring of 1945, a young German prisoner named Klaus Zimmermann arrived at Camp Concordia carrying more than just a broken back. He carried the weight of Nazi propaganda, Soviet brutality, and the certainty that the Americans who now held him would be no different from any other captor. He was wrong, and that discovery would haunt him, sustain him, and ultimately transform him in ways he could never have imagined. Klaus Zimmermann should have been paralyzed. He should have been dead. Instead, he was about to learn what it meant to be treated with dignity by the very people he had been trained to see as enemies. This is his story. But more than that, this is the story of what happens when ordinary Americans choose compassion over hatred, when they decide that even enemies deserve humanity. Camp Concordia sits in northeastern Kansas, a sprawl of wooden barracks surrounded by wire fencing and guard towers. The war in Europe is almost over. Germany is collapsing from both east and west. Prisoner of war transports arrive almost daily carrying men captured in France, Italy, North Africa, and now in these final weeks from camps recently liberated by Soviet or American forces in Central Europe. These last prisoners are different. They look older even when they are young. They move carefully as if every step must be calculated. The intake officers at Concordia have learned to spot them within minutes. They are the ones who flinch at sudden movements, the ones who eat slowly as if they cannot quite believe the food is real and will not be taken away. Klaus arrives on a Thursday afternoon in a group of 32 German prisoners transferred from a temporary holding facility in New York. His name is recorded on the transport manifest as Klaus Zimmermann, 18 years old, born in a village near Stuttgart, captured by American forces in Bavaria in early April. The intake clerk writes down these details without looking up. The boy is told to remove his shirt and shoes for the standard medical screening. He complies without protest. During the months of training before he was sent to the Eastern Front, Klaus had been shown propaganda films. The Americans his instructors said were weak and soft. They cared only for money and comfort. But when they took prisoners, the propaganda warned they would be cruel. They would work you to death. They would mock you. They would treat you as less than human because that is what the Jewish-controlled American government taught its soldiers to do. Klaus believed these things because he was 17 years old and had no reason to doubt them. Now standing in line at the intake station, he watches American soldiers process the German prisoners with an efficiency that seems almost bored. No one is shouting, no one is striking anyone. One of the American guards is even helping an elderly German prisoner fill out a form speaking in broken but earnest German. Klaus does not know what to make of this. He stays silent and waits for the other shoe to drop. The nurse takes his pulse, checks his eyes and mouth, and measures his height and weight. She writes down 5 feet 8 inches and 107 pounds. Then she asks him to stand straight and touch his toes. He bends forward slowly, keeping his knees locked, and stops halfway. The nurse assumes he is being uncooperative. She repeats the instruction in German, her accent thick but understandable. Klaus tries again. He stops at the same point. His face remains expressionless, but his breathing becomes suddenly shallow. The camp medical officer, Captain Howard Lintz, happens to be in the room conducting a training session for 2 junior medics. He is 38 years old, raised on a farm in Minnesota, and earned his medical degree in 1932 during the depths of the Depression. He has seen wounded men in North Africa. He knows the difference between defiance and pain. Lintz walks over and asks the boy in accented German if he is in pain. The boy says no. Lintz asks him to lift his right leg while standing on his left. The boy does it without difficulty. Lintz asks him to lift his left leg while standing on his right. The boy hesitates. He shifts his weight. He lifts the leg only a few inches before setting it down again. Lintz tells the nurse to send him for an X-ray before final processing. The nurse marks his file with a red flag and moves on to the next prisoner. The boy is told to sit on a bench near the infirmary entrance and wait. He sits down carefully, leaning forward slightly, and does not move for the next 40 minutes. We are still at Camp Concordia now, inside the camp infirmary X-ray room. The technician positions Klaus in front of the machine and tells him to stand straight and hold his breath. The exposure takes 3 seconds. The technician develops the film in the darkroom and brings it out to Captain Lintz, who is finishing paperwork at his desk. Lintz holds the film up to the window light. He squints. Then he stands up and walks to the examination room where Klaus is waiting. He asks Klaus in German to lie face down on the table. He presses his fingers along the boy's lower spine, starting at the base of the ribs and moving down toward the pelvis. At the 3rd and 4th lumbar vertebrae, Klaus flinches but does not cry out. Lintz presses again more gently and feels a slight irregularity in the spacing between the bones. He tells Klaus to sit up. He looks at the young man for a long moment. Then he asks a direct question. When did this happen? Klaus does not answer immediately. He looks at the floor. Then he says in slow, careful German that he does not remember a specific moment. Lintz asks if he fell, if he was beaten, if something heavy landed on his back. Klaus says all of those things happened at different times. Lintz asks when the pain started. Klaus says it started in January after the march. Lintz writes this down. He asks what march. Klaus says the march from the labor camp in Czechia to Bavaria. Lintz asks how long the march lasted. Klaus says 15 days, maybe 16. He is not certain because they marched at night sometimes and rested in barns or ditches during the day. Lintz asks if he was given medical attention during the march. Klaus almost smiles. He says no. No one was given medical attention. Captain Lintz calls for the senior camp physician, Major Eugene Callahan, and the Red Cross liaison officer, a civilian named Robert Marsh. All 3 men review the X-ray together in the infirmary office. Callahan points out the compression fractures in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th lumbar vertebrae. He notes that the damage is not acute. It did not happen in a single traumatic event. The fractures are old, partially healed, and show signs of repeated stress and impact over an extended period. Marsh asks if the boy could have been walking and working with this injury. Callahan says yes, because the spinal cord itself does not appear severed. But the boy would have been in chronic pain. Any additional trauma could cause permanent paralysis. Lintz tells them the boy claims he was on a forced march in January. Marsh writes this down and says he will contact the War Refugee Board and request any available transport logs or survivor testimonies from Czechia in early 1945. Before Klaus can be interviewed in depth before the doctors can decide on treatment, there is the matter of dinner. It is now past 6 in the evening. Klaus has not eaten since a piece of dry bread at the holding facility in New York 12 hours ago. An American guard escorts him to the camp mess hall. This is the moment everything changes. Klaus walks into a large wooden building filled with long tables. The smell hits him first. Meat. Real meat cooking. Not the thin vegetable broth he remembers from the Soviet labor camp. Not the scraps of fat and gristle the SS guards threw to prisoners during the march. The smell of beef stew, rich and heavy with onions and carrots. He gets in line with the other German prisoners. At the front of the line stands an American soldier, older than most of the guards, with weathered skin and kind eyes. This is Sergeant Bill Thompson, 53 years old, a cattle rancher from Texas who enlisted after Pearl Harbor, despite being well past the age requirement. He serves food with the easy competence of a man who has fed ranch hands for 30 years. Thompson looks at Klaus and sees a boy who weighs barely more than 100 pounds. He ladles beef stew into a metal tray. Then he adds a thick slice of bread, real butter on the side, a cup of coffee. And then because Sergeant Thompson believes that no one, not even a German prisoner, should go to bed hungry, he adds a slice of apple pie. Klaus stares at the tray. He looks up at Thompson. The American smiles and says something in English that Klaus does not understand, but the tone is clear. Eat, enjoy. Klaus carries his tray to a table and sits down. He picks up the spoon. He takes a bite of the stew. The meat is tender. The broth is seasoned with salt and pepper and herbs he cannot name. It is the first proper meal he has eaten in 8 months. Around him, other German prisoners are eating with the same stunned silence. One older man begins to cry quietly into his stew. Another prisoner whispers in German, asking if this is some kind of trick. Are they fattening us up before something terrible happens? Klaus does not answer. He eats slowly, methodically. He finishes the stew. He eats the bread. He drinks the coffee, which is hot and real and sweetened with actual sugar. He saves the pie for last. Apple pie still warm with a flaky crust that crumbles at the touch of his fork. He takes one bite, then another. He thinks about the propaganda films, the instructors who said Americans were decadent and weak. He thinks about the Soviet guards who beat him for moving too slowly. He thinks about the SS officer who would have shot him on the 8th day of the march if not for Otto Hartmann. And for the first time in months, Klaus Zimmermann allows himself to feel something other than fear or pain. He feels confusion, because nothing he was taught prepared him for this moment. Nothing explained why the enemy would feed him better than his own side ever did. The next morning, Klaus wakes in a barracks with clean sheets and a pillow. This too is unexpected. He goes to breakfast, still half convinced that yesterday was an anomaly. But the American cook serves him again. This time it is eggs, fried potatoes, toast, and strips of crispy bacon. Klaus has not seen bacon in a year. During his childhood in the village near Stuttgart, bacon was a luxury reserved for Sunday mornings. During the war, it disappeared entirely. Now an American soldier is putting 3 strips on his tray as casually as if it were nothing. Klaus sits down at the table. He picks up 1 strip of bacon. It is still hot. The edges are crispy and dark. He bites into it. The salt and fat explode across his tongue. The texture is perfect, crunching between his teeth and then melting. He closes his eyes. Another German prisoner sitting across from him is weeping openly. The man is perhaps 40 years old, with hollow cheeks and trembling hands. He holds a piece of bacon and stares at it as if it is a miracle. He says in German, "I have children. They have not eaten like this in 3 years, and here I am, a prisoner, eating bacon." Klaus does not know what to say. He finishes his breakfast in silence. But something is shifting inside him. Some wall he built during the months in the labor camp, during the beatings, during the march where men died in the snow. That wall is beginning to crack. After breakfast, Klaus is called back to the infirmary. Captain Lintz is waiting with Major Callahan and Robert Marsh. They sit in a small room adjacent to the main examination area. There is no guard in the room. This surprises Klaus. He has never been questioned without a guard present. Marsh explains in fluent German that this is not a punishment or a tribunal. They need to understand what happened to Klaus so they can provide proper medical care and document the incident for the Red Cross and the War Crimes Commission. Klaus nods but does not speak. Marsh asks him to start from the beginning. Where was he when the injury occurred? Klaus takes a breath. He says he was not injured in one place. He was injured many times in many places. Marsh asks him to be specific, and so Klaus begins to tell his story. He was drafted into the German army in August of 1944, 2 months after his 17th birthday. He received 6 weeks of training at a facility near Munich. The training was rushed, chaotic. Germany was losing the war, though no one said this aloud. They needed bodies to throw at the Eastern Front. Klaus was assigned to an infantry unit sent to reinforce positions in Poland. His unit was overrun by Soviet forces in late November near the town of Katowice. Most of his company was killed or scattered in the confusion. Klaus and 12 others were taken prisoner by the Red Army and held in a makeshift camp for 3 days before being transferred to a Soviet-controlled labor battalion. He was sent to a coal sorting facility 20 kilometers west of Katowice. The work involved loading coal from rail cars onto trucks, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. There was no protective equipment. The rations were 1 meal per day, usually soup made from potato peels and grain husks. Marsh interrupts. He asks if Klaus was beaten during this time. Klaus says yes, regularly. The guards used wooden clubs and rifle butts. If a prisoner moved too slowly, if a truck was not loaded on time, the guards would strike whoever was closest. Klaus was struck across the back and shoulders at least a dozen times that he can remember clearly. Some of the blows knocked him down. Once he dropped a coal sack, a guard kicked him repeatedly while he was on the ground. He does not know if that was when the vertebrae were damaged, but the pain in his lower back started sometime in late December. He told no one because there was no medical officer at the labor site. Complaining usually resulted in more beatings. Lentz listens to all of this with his hands folded on the desk. His face shows nothing but his jaw is tight. He has seen what war does to men. But hearing it described in the flat, affectless tone of an 18-year-old boy is something else entirely. Marsh asks what happened in January. Klaus says the Soviet forces began evacuating the labor camps because the front was moving west again. The prisoners were told they would be marched to a rail depot and transported deeper into Soviet-controlled territory. But the march never reached the depot. After 3 days on foot, they encountered a German SS unit retreating from the east. There was a brief firefight. The Soviet guards abandoned the prisoners and fled. The SS officer in charge ordered the prisoners to march with his unit toward Bavaria. Klaus says there were about 60 prisoners at that point, a mix of Germans, Poles, Hungarians. They marched for 15 days, mostly at night, through snow and frozen mud. They were given no food except what they could scavenge from abandoned farms. Several prisoners collapsed and were shot by the SS guards. Here Klaus pauses. His voice, which has been steady until now, wavers slightly. He says he nearly collapsed on the 8th day. He fell to his knees and could not stand. The pain in his back was like fire. He could not breathe. An SS guard pulled out his pistol and walked toward him. But then another prisoner, an older man, pulled Klaus to his feet. The man's name was Otto Hartmann. He was 45 years old, a printer from Berlin. Otto supported Klaus for the next 2 kilometers until Klaus could walk on his own again. Captain Lentz leans forward. He asks where Otto is now. Klaus says he does not know. They were separated when American forces captured the group in Bavaria. That was the last time he saw Otto. Klaus's voice is barely above a whisper when he says this. He stares at his hands. Lentz makes a note. He will look for Otto Hartmann in the transport logs. It is the least he can do. The interview continues for another hour. Klaus describes the rest of the march, the cold, the hunger, the men who died. He describes Otto sharing his meager scraps of food. Otto talking about his wife and 2 daughters in Berlin. Otto saying on the 13th night with blood on his lips from coughing that Klaus would survive. That Klaus should find Otto's family when the war ended and tell them he tried. Klaus did not understand what Otto meant at the time. He understands now. When the interview finally ends, Marsh thanks Klaus for his cooperation. He says this information will be used to document war crimes committed by both Soviet and German forces. Klaus will not be punished for anything he has said. This is simply about recording the truth. Klaus nods. He stands to leave. Then he turns back and asks a question that has been building in his mind since he arrived at Camp Concordia. He asks Captain Lentz in halting German why the Americans are being kind to him. Lentz considers this question for a long moment. Then he says in his careful accented German, because it is the right thing to do. Klaus does not know how to respond to this. The right thing. As if kindness needs no other justification. As if treating people with dignity is simply what decent human beings do. This concept is so foreign to everything Klaus has experienced in the past 8 months that he cannot quite process it. He leaves the room and walks back to his barracks in a daze. Over the next 3 days, Klaus exists in a state of suspended disbelief. He eats 3 meals a day, real food, meat, vegetables, bread with butter, coffee with sugar. He sleeps in a clean bed. He is given new clothes to replace the rags he arrived in. American guards speak to him without anger or contempt. One guard, a young man from Iowa, even teaches Klaus a few words of English. Hello, thank you. Good morning. Klaus learns that Camp Concordia holds about 4,000 German prisoners. Most were captured in France or Italy. They work on local farms during the day, earning small wages that go into accounts they can access after the war. They play soccer in the evenings. They attend religious services on Sundays. They receive letters from home through the Red Cross. This is not what Klaus expected from captivity. This is not what he was taught to expect. And the dissonance between expectation and reality is slowly, inexorably changing something fundamental in how he sees the world. On the fourth day, Klaus is called back to the infirmary. Captain Lentz has consulted with orthopedic specialists from the Army Medical Corps. They have reviewed the X-ray images. They confirmed the diagnosis. Klaus has sustained compression fractures of the third, fourth, and fifth lumbar vertebrae, consistent with repeated blunt force trauma and prolonged physical strain. The specialists estimate that the fractures occurred over a period of weeks. Klaus continued to walk and work during the healing process, which prevented proper bone recovery. The result is permanent structural damage. The vertebrae will not heal to their original shape. Klaus will likely experience chronic pain for the rest of his life. He is at high risk for spinal cord injury if subjected to further trauma. Lentz writes a formal medical report and submits it to the camp commander, Colonel Raymond Fisher. The report includes a recommendation that Klaus be classified as medically unfit for labor and transferred to a hospital facility for long-term observation and treatment. Colonel Fisher approves the transfer. The report is forwarded to the War Department in Washington. Robert Marsh submits a parallel report to the International Red Cross headquarters in Geneva. He documents the suspected war crimes committed by both Soviet and German SS forces during Klaus's captivity. He requests an investigation and asks for any available survivor testimonies from the Silesia labor camps in the January evacuations. Marsh notes that Klaus's case is not unique. At least 8 other prisoners processed through Camp Concordia in the past month have shown signs of severe malnutrition, untreated injuries, and physical abuse that occurred while in Soviet or German custody during the final months of the war. 2 days later, on a warm afternoon in early May, Captain Lentz meets with Klaus one more time before the transfer. He explains that Klaus will be sent to a military hospital in St. Louis, where doctors will evaluate whether surgery or other treatment can reduce the pain. Klaus asks if he will be sent back to Germany after the treatment. Lentz says he does not know. That decision will be made by the War Department after the war ends. Klaus nods. He thanks Lentz in German. Lentz hesitates. Then he asks if there is anything else Klaus needs. Klaus says no. Then he pauses. He asks very quietly if Captain Lentz could try to find out what happened to Otto Hartmann, the man from Berlin who saved his life. Lentz promises he will try. He will check the transport logs. He will contact the Red Cross. If Otto is alive, Lentz will find him. Klaus thanks him again. For the first time since arriving at Camp Concordia, something like hope flickers in his eyes. The next day, Klaus boards a military train bound for St. Louis. He carries a small duffel bag with the clothes the Americans gave him. He carries the memory of bacon and apple pie and coffee with sugar. He carries the weight of 3 crushed vertebrae and 8 months of accumulated trauma. But he also carries something new, something he did not have when he arrived. He carries the knowledge that the enemy he was taught to hate had shown him more kindness in 1 week than his own side had shown in months. As the train pulls away from Camp Concordia, Klaus watches the Kansas countryside roll past the window. Flat fields, blue sky, a landscape untouched by war. And for the first time since he was 17 years old and boarding a truck to the Eastern Front, Klaus Zimmermann allows himself to imagine a future that does not involve pain or fear or hatred. He does not yet know that the journey ahead will change his life in ways he cannot foresee. He does not know that he will meet an American woman who will teach him what it means to heal. He does not know that he will one day return to this country not as a prisoner, but as a free man, or that he will be buried in American soil by people who consider him family. All he knows sitting on that train heading east towards St. Louis is that something inside him has shifted. Some fundamental assumption about the world has been proven wrong. And in the space left by that broken assumption, something else is beginning to grow. The train rolls on through the heart of America. Klaus leans his head against the window and closes his eyes. The pain in his back is still there. It will always be there. But for the first time in 8 months, Klaus Zimmermann falls asleep without fear. The military hospital in St. Louis sits on a hill overlooking the Mississippi River. It is a sprawling brick building that was once a university before the war turned it into a facility for wounded soldiers and prisoners of war. Klaus Zimmermann arrives on a Thursday morning in mid-May of 1945, just days after Germany surrenders unconditionally to the Allied forces. The war in Europe is over. But for Klaus, something else is just beginning. He is assigned to Ward 7, a long room with 12 beds. The other 11 are occupied by German prisoners, all being treated for injuries or illnesses sustained during captivity. Most sleep for long stretches or sit in silence, staring out the windows at a city they will never truly know. The ward smells of antiseptic and floor wax. Sunlight streams through tall windows. It is quiet in a way that feels almost sacred after months of chaos. Klaus is examined by an orthopedic surgeon named Captain Donald Pierce. Pierce is 42 years old, trained at Johns Hopkins, and has spent the past 3 years repairing shattered bones and torn ligaments in young men who will carry their wounds for the rest of their lives. He reviews the x-rays from Camp Concordia and orders a new set of images to confirm the diagnosis. The new images show what Lintz already documented. The vertebrae are compressed and partially healed in a deformed position. The damage is permanent. Pierce sits down with Klaus and explains the options in careful, slow German, supplemented by gestures and drawings. There is a surgery they can attempt. Spinal fusion using metal rods to stabilize the damaged vertebrae. It might reduce the pain. It might prevent further injury. But there is significant risk. Damage to the nerves during the procedure could result in permanent paralysis of the legs. Klaus listens to all of this with his hands folded in his lap. When Pierce finishes, Klaus asks what will happen if he does not have the surgery. Pierce says the pain will likely remain constant. Any future injury to the lower back could cause paralysis anyway. The vertebrae are fragile. One bad fall, one wrong movement, and Klaus could lose the ability to walk. Klaus thinks about this for a long time. He thinks about the 15-day march, about continuing to walk when every step felt like knives in his spine, about Otto pulling him to his feet when he could not stand on his own. He thinks about surviving 8 months of hell only to risk losing everything on an operating table. He tells Captain Pierce he does not want the surgery. Pierce respects this decision. He does not argue or try to change Klaus's mind. He simply nods and prescribes an alternative treatment plan. Bed rest, physical therapy, pain medication. They will do everything they can to help Klaus manage the injury without surgery. Klaus thanks him. He does not explain that his refusal comes from a deeper place than fear of paralysis. He does not explain that being able to walk even in pain is the only thing that makes him feel human, that losing the ability to move on his own would be worse than any amount of suffering. Pierce shakes Klaus's hand and leaves. And that is when Sarah Mitchell walks into his life. She is 26 years old with dark hair pinned back in a practical bun and eyes that have seen too much grief for someone so young. She wears the uniform of an Army physical therapist and carries a clipboard. When she enters the ward, she walks directly to Klaus's bed and introduces herself in clear, measured German. "Hello, Klaus. I am Sarah. I am going to help you get stronger." Klaus stares at her, an American woman, speaking to him without fear or disgust, treating him as if he is a patient, not a prisoner, not an enemy, just a person who needs help. Sarah pulls up a chair and sits down. She explains that they will work together 3 times a week. She will teach him exercises to maintain flexibility and prevent muscle atrophy. She will show him how to sit, stand, and walk in ways that minimize strain on his damaged spine. Klaus nods but says nothing. He is not sure what to make of this woman who looks at him with professional courtesy, but also something else, something that might be compassion. What Klaus does not know, what Sarah will never tell him in those early weeks, is that her younger brother was killed at Normandy. He was 19 years old, a farm boy from Illinois who loved baseball and wanted to be a teacher. He died on a beach in France, shot by German soldiers who were probably not much older than he was. Sarah has every reason to hate Klaus, every reason to do the bare minimum and no more. But when she looks at this boy with hollow eyes and a body that should not be able to stand, she does not see the enemy. She sees someone's son, someone's brother, a victim of the same war that took everything from her. She chooses kindness, not because it is easy, but because it is right. The first therapy session is awkward and painful. Sarah guides Klaus through gentle stretching exercises. She shows him how to roll out of bed without twisting his spine, how to stand by engaging his core muscles rather than relying on his back. How to walk with shorter steps and a slight forward lean to reduce pressure on the damaged vertebrae. Klaus follows every instruction. He is a disciplined patient. He never complains. When Sarah asks if something hurts, he gives honest answers. Yes, a little, very much. She adjusts accordingly. At the end of the session, Sarah tells Klaus he did well. She will see him again on Friday. Klaus thanks her in careful English. Thank you, Miss Sarah. She smiles. It is the first real smile anyone has given him in longer than he can remember. You are welcome, Klaus. You can just call me Sarah. Over the following weeks, something unexpected happens. Klaus begins to heal. Not just physically, though the exercises do help strengthen the muscles around his damaged spine. He heals in other ways, deeper ways. Sarah brings him a cheeseburger from the hospital cafeteria one afternoon. She says he needs protein to build muscle. Klaus unwraps the paper and stares at the sandwich. 2 thick beef patties, melted cheese, lettuce and tomato and pickles, a soft white bun. He takes a bite. The flavors explode in his mouth, savory and rich and somehow uniquely American. He has never tasted anything like it. He looks at Sarah with something close to wonder. This is amazing, he says in broken English. Sarah laughs. Wait until you try a proper Texas barbecue. Klaus does not know what that means, but he files the words away. Texas barbecue, another piece of America he is learning about. During their sessions, Sarah asks about Klaus's family, where he is from, what his life was like before the war. Klaus tells her about the village near Stuttgart, about his parents, his younger sister Greta, who was 14 when he left. He has not heard from them since 1944. He does not know if they are alive. Sarah promises that the Red Cross will help him find them. She says it with such certainty that Klaus almost believes her. In the 3rd week, Klaus mentions Otto for the first time. He does not mean to. They are doing stretching exercises, and Sarah asks if he is thinking about something. The expression on his face has changed, gone distant. Klaus hesitates. Then he tells her about the man from Berlin who saved his life. The printer who pulled him to his feet when the SS guard was about to shoot him, who shared his food and talked about his daughters and promised Klaus would survive even when Otto knew he would not. Sarah listens without interrupting. When Klaus finishes, his voice is barely above a whisper. His eyes are wet. Sarah does not pull away or change the subject. She sits with him in the silence. After a long moment, she says something that will stay with Klaus for the rest of his life. It is okay to grieve. It is okay to feel. Klaus looks at her. He says grief is weakness. We were taught this. Sarah shakes her head firmly. That is wrong. Grief is human. Being human is strength. Klaus does not fully understand this yet, but he is beginning to. That night, Klaus cries for the first time since he was captured. Quiet tears that soak his pillow in the darkness. He cries for Otto, for the other men who died on the march, for the boy he was before the war, for all the things he has lost and will never get back. But he also cries because someone finally gave him permission to. Because an American woman whose brother was killed by German soldiers told him it was okay to be human. In June, something extraordinary happens. The hospital staff organizes a baseball game. Wounded American soldiers versus a mixed team of recovering patients that includes both Americans and German prisoners. Sarah insists that Klaus watch. He is not cleared to play, but she wants him to see it, to understand what baseball means to Americans, to see how the game can bring people together. Klaus sits on a bench near the makeshift diamond. The field is just a cleared patch of ground behind the hospital with bases marked by canvas bags. But the players treat it like sacred ground. They warm up with practiced motions. They call out to each other in English that Klaus is beginning to understand in fragments. The game begins. Klaus watches with growing fascination. The rhythm of it, the crack of the bat, the way players run and slide and leap, the way both teams cheer for good plays even when the other side makes them. In the 5th inning, one of the American players sprains his ankle sliding into second base. He limps off the field, then cursing good-naturedly. The team is short a player. Someone calls out, "Hey, Klaus, you want to fill in?" Klaus freezes. He looks at Sarah. She nods encouragingly. He stands up slowly. He walks to the plate. Someone hands him a bat. It is heavier than he expected. An American soldier shows him how to hold it. Another explains the rules in simple English, supplemented with gestures. Klaus steps up to bat. The pitcher throws. Klaus swings and misses. Both teams laugh, but not in a cruel way. They are laughing with him, not at him. The pitcher throws again. Klaus swings again, misses again. Strike three. Klaus is out. But something amazing happens. Both teams applaud anyway. Someone claps him on the shoulder. Another player says, "Good try, kid. You will get it next time." Klaus walks back to the bench and realizes he is smiling, actually smiling. For the first time in a year, he has done something that has nothing to do with survival or pain or war. He has played. He has been part of something. After the game, everyone gathers in the shade. Someone produces bottles of Coca-Cola from a cooler packed with ice. Klaus has never seen a Coca-Cola bottle before. It is small and curved and made of thick green glass. An American soldier named Jimmy opens one and hands it to Klaus. He shows Klaus how to use the bottle opener. The cap comes off with a satisfying pop and a hiss of carbonation. Klaus takes a sip. The liquid is cold and sweet and fizzy. It tastes like nothing he has ever experienced. Sugar and something else he cannot name. Something bright and optimistic. Jimmy grins at him. "Welcome to America, kid." Klaus drinks the whole bottle. When he is finished, he looks at the empty glass in his hand and makes a decision. He will keep the bottle cap. He will put it in his pocket and carry it as a reminder of this moment, of the day he played baseball with Americans and drank Coca-Cola and laughed. Later, Sarah asks him what he thought of the game. Klaus struggles to find the words in English. Finally, he says, "I forget I am prisoner." Sarah's expression softens. "You are not a prisoner, Klaus. You are a patient. There is a difference." Klaus nods, though he is not entirely sure he understands the distinction. But he wants to understand. He wants to believe that there is a difference between being held captive and being cared for, between being an enemy and being a human being who needs help. While Klaus is learning to heal in St. Louis, Captain Howard Lintz is keeping his promise in Kansas. Every evening after his duties are done, Lintz sits at his desk in the Camp Concordia Infirmary and searches through transport logs. He cross-references names with Red Cross records. He contacts temporary holding facilities in New York and New Jersey. He is looking for Otto Hartmann, 45 years old, printer from Berlin, last seen in Bavaria in April of 1945. For 3 weeks, Lintz finds nothing. Otto Hartmann seems to have vanished, but Lintz does not give up. He expands his search to British and French authorities. He sends inquiries to the International Red Cross in Geneva. In the 3rd week of June, he receives a response. The letter from Geneva is brief and formal. It contains information about Otto Hartmann, but it is not the information Lintz hoped to find. Otto Hartmann is deceased. Date of death, January 14, 1945. Location en route during forced march from Silesia region to Bavaria. Caused pneumonia and exhaustion compounded by gunshot wound when subject could no longer continue march. Lintz reads the report 3 times. He cross-references the dates. January 14th. That was the 14th day of the march Klaus described. The day after Otto saved Klaus from the SS guard who was about to execute him. Otto Hartmann died the day after he pulled Klaus to his feet. He died because he used his last reserves of strength to save someone else. Lintz sits at his desk for a long time staring at the letter. He thinks about writing to Klaus immediately, but something tells him this news needs to be delivered carefully. Klaus is fragile, still healing. This information could break him. Lintz calls the hospital in St. Louis and asks to speak with Sarah Mitchell. When she comes to the phone, he explains the situation. He has information about Otto Hartmann. It is not good news. Can she be with Klaus when Lintz calls to tell him Sarah says yes immediately? She will make sure Klaus is not alone. The next day, Sarah brings Klaus to a private office in the hospital. There is a telephone on the desk. She sits beside him and takes his hand. She tells him that Captain Lintz has news about Otto. Klaus's face goes very still. He knows what is coming, has known since the moment he was separated from Otto in Bavaria. But knowing and hearing are different things. Sarah dials the number. Lintz's voice comes through tinny and distant. He speaks in German, slow and gentle. "Klaus, I have information about Otto Hartmann." There is a long pause. Klaus's hand tightens around Sarah's. He is dead, is he not? Klaus asks. Linz says yes. He is sorry. Otto died on January 14th. Pneumonia. He was shot by guards when he could no longer walk. Klaus is silent. A single tear runs down his face. Linz continues, he died the day after he saved you, Klaus. He used everything he had left to keep you alive. Klaus nods, though Linz cannot see this. His voice, when he finally speaks, is steady, but hollow. He knew. He told me he would not make it. I did not want to believe him. Linz says there is more. He contacted Otto's family through the Red Cross. Otto's wife is still alive in Berlin. She knows what happened. She wanted Klaus to know something. Klaus waits. Otto's last words were about you. He said, tell the boy from Stuttgart I am glad I could help. Klaus breaks. The tears come in full now, and he does not try to stop them. Sarah holds his hand and does not let go. After Klaus composes himself, he asks if he can write to Otto's family. Linz says yes. The Red Cross will facilitate it. Klaus can send a letter, and they will make sure it reaches Otto's widow and daughters. Klaus thanks Linz. He thanks him for keeping his promise, for finding out what happened even though the news was terrible, for caring enough to look. Linz says it was the least he could do. He wishes he could have brought better news. When the call ends, Klaus sits in the chair and stares at his hands. Sarah stays with him. She does not offer empty comfort or false hope. She simply stays. Present, human. After a long silence, Klaus says, I need to write to them. To Otto's family. I need to tell them he was a hero. Sarah nods. We will help you. We will make sure they know. That evening, Klaus sits at a small desk in the hospital library with pen and paper. Sarah sits nearby, helping with German grammar when Klaus gets stuck. He writes slowly, carefully, each word chosen with deliberate precision. Dear Frau Hartmann, I am Klaus Zimmermann. Your husband saved my life. He describes the march, the cold, the hunger, the moment when Klaus fell and could not stand, and Otto pulled him up. He describes Otto sharing his food, talking about his daughters, giving Klaus hope when there was no reason to hope. He writes, your husband taught me that humanity transcends nations. He showed me what it means to be a good man. I am alive because of him. Everything I do from this day forward, I do in his memory. He closes the letter with a promise. When I return to Germany, I will visit you. I will tell your daughters their father was the bravest man I knew. Klaus folds the letter carefully. Sarah adds her own note written in careful German. She introduces herself as the nurse caring for Klaus. She wants Frau Hartmann to know that her husband saved not just Klaus's body, but his soul. That Klaus arrived broken and angry and lost, but is now becoming kind and thoughtful and hopeful. That is Otto's legacy. He created goodness in the darkest time. The letter is sent through the Red Cross. Klaus does not know if it will reach Berlin. The city is in ruins, divided between occupying powers, but he has to try. He owes Otto that much. In August, Klaus is cleared for discharge. His back pain is manageable with the exercises Sarah taught him. He will never be free of it, but he can function. He can walk. He can work. He is transferred back to Camp Concordia and assigned to light duty in the camp library. His job is to organize books, repair damaged bindings, and help with the prisoner education program. The work is quiet and suits him. In the evenings, Klaus teaches himself more English. He uses a German to English dictionary and a set of children's books donated by a church group in Kansas City. Other prisoners sometimes ask for help with their own English lessons. Klaus is patient and methodical as a tutor. He remembers how Sarah taught him with clarity and encouragement, and he tries to do the same. One prisoner, a former school teacher from Dresden, tells Klaus he would make a good teacher someday. Klaus does not respond to this. He does not think about the future in those terms yet. He thinks only about the next day, the next task, the next page. But something is changing in how he sees himself. He is beginning to imagine possibilities beyond survival. In September, Sarah is transferred to another hospital facility. Before she leaves, she comes to Camp Concordia to say goodbye. She and Klaus sit in the library, surrounded by shelves of books neither of them will ever read together. Sarah tells Klaus he is going to do great things. She feels it. Klaus says he does not know how to thank her. She says he can thank her by being the man Otto believed he could be. Then she does something unexpected. She writes her his address on a piece of paper and hands it to Klaus. She tells him to write to her, to let her know he is okay, to stay in touch. Klaus promises he will. He folds the paper carefully and puts it in his pocket next to the Coca-Cola bottle cap from the baseball game. Sarah stands to leave. At the door, she turns back. She says, "You showed me something important, Klaus. You showed me why my brother's sacrifice mattered. Real freedom means treating even enemies with dignity. If we do not do that, what did he die for?" Klaus does not know what to say. He watches her walk away and realizes he has just lost one of the most important people in his life. But he also knows he will see her again. Somehow. Someday. Early 1946, the United States government begins the process of repatriating German prisoners of war. Klaus is classified as low risk. He was a conscript, not a volunteer. He has no Nazi party affiliation. He cooperated fully with the War Crimes Documentation Unit. What Klaus does not know is that his testimony helped convict SS Captain Werner Kruger in a war crimes trial. The information Klaus provided combined with accounts from 16 other prisoners sent Kruger to prison. But this is kept confidential. Klaus will never learn that his words mattered in that way. In March of 1946, Klaus is placed on a transport list. He will be sent back to Germany within 2 months. Before he leaves, Captain Lintz calls him to his office one final time. Lintz has something for him. He pulls a small American flag from his desk drawer. It is only 6 inches across, the kind meant to be placed on a desk or carried in a pocket. "Keep this," Lintz says. "Remember what we fight for. Freedom, dignity, second chances." Klaus takes the flag carefully. He promises he will never forget American kindness. Lintz says, "Do not just remember. Pay it forward." Klaus does not fully understand what this means yet, but he will. In May of 1946, Klaus boards a Liberty ship bound for Bremerhaven. There are 280 German prisoners aboard, all heading home to a country that no longer exists in the form they remember. Germany is occupied, divided in ruins. Klaus spends most of the voyage on deck, leaning against the rail and watching the ocean. On the last day before they sight land, another prisoner asks him what he will miss about America. Klaus thinks for a long time. Then he pulls the Coca-Cola bottle cap from his pocket. He has carried it for 9 months through therapy sessions and library work and the long winter at Camp Concordia. He says, this reminds me that people can be good." The prisoner does not understand. Klaus does not explain further. Some things cannot be put into words. When the ship docks in Bremerhaven, Klaus steps onto German soil for the first time in nearly 2 years. He is processed through a British-controlled repatriation center. He is given civilian clothes, a temporary identity card, and a travel voucher for rail transport. He takes a train south towards Stuttgart. The journey takes 4 days instead of 1 because the rail lines are damaged. Klaus sees the destruction, bombed cities, displaced people, the physical evidence of total defeat. When he finally reaches his village, he finds his family's house still standing but occupied by refugees from the east. A neighbor tells him his parents left in January of 1945 and went to stay with relatives in Bavaria. They are in a refugee camp near Nuremberg. Klaus travels to Nuremberg. He finds the camp a collection of wooden barracks surrounded by wire fencing. It houses about 600 people. He finds his parents in the third barrack. His mother cries when she sees him. His father shakes his hand and says nothing for a long time. They thought he was dead. They received no word for more than a year. Klaus asks about his sister Greta. His mother says she is alive, living with an aunt north of Munich. Klaus feels relief wash over him. They all survived. He stays with his parents for 2 weeks. He helps them apply for permanent housing and ration cards. He does not tell them about the injury, about the pain that wakes him every morning, about the x-rays in Kansas or the hospital in St. Louis. They have enough to worry about. Before he leaves, his father asks what he will do now. Klaus says he will find work, learn a trade, rebuild. What he does not say is that he carries America in his heart now. The kindness he was shown, the bacon and Coca-Cola and baseball, the people who chose to see him as human rather than enemy. These things have changed him in ways he cannot fully articulate. He keeps the small American flag hidden in his belongings. He keeps the Coca-Cola bottle cap in his pocket. And he keeps Sarah's address folded in his wallet. In June of 1946, he writes his first letter to her. Dear Sarah, I am home. My family is alive. I think of American kindness every day. Thank you for everything. Klaus. 3 weeks later, he receives a reply. She is glad he is safe. She is proud of how far he has come. She believes he will do good things with his second chance. And so Klaus begins to rebuild. He apprentices as a carpenter in Heidelberg. He works hard, applies the discipline he learned in therapy. Do it right, do it well, be reliable. These are American values, he thinks, values worth keeping. Over the following years, Klaus saves money. He has two goals. First, to visit Otto's family in Berlin and fulfill his promise. Second, secret and almost impossible to visit America again someday. Not as a prisoner, as a free man. It seems like a dream. But Klaus has learned something important in the past 2 years. Sometimes the impossible becomes possible through small acts of kindness, through people choosing to do the right thing even when it is hard. He does not know it yet, but in 26 years, that impossible dream will come true in the most unexpected way. He will return to the land that healed him. He will see Sarah again. He will drink Coca-Cola and watch baseball and stand on American soil as a free man. But that is still far in the future. For now, Klaus simply works and saves and writes letters across the ocean. He carries his pain quietly. He remembers Otto every day, and he tries to live in a way that honors the second chance he was given by strangers who chose compassion over hatred. The broken spine will never fully heal, but the broken spirit has been made whole. And that happened in America in a place called Kansas, in a hospital in St. Louis, through the actions of people who believe that even enemies deserve humanity. Klaus tucks the Coca-Cola bottle cap back into his pocket and gets back to work. There is so much to rebuild, so much to prove, so much to become. And he will, because Otto saved him, because Sarah healed him, because America showed him a better way. The rest is just time and perseverance. And Klaus Zimmermann has plenty of both. 27 years is a long time to carry pain, long enough that it becomes part of who you are, long enough that you forget what it feels like to stand without that constant ache in your lower back, that sharp reminder every morning that your body was broken and never quite healed right. By January of 1972, Klaus Zimmermann is 45 years old. He has built a good life in Heidelberg. He married Anna Weber in 1953, a kind woman who asked few questions about the war and loved him despite the scars she saw on his back. They have a daughter, Margaret, now 14 years old. Klaus runs a small carpentry business. He is known for honest work and fair prices. Neighbors respect him. Customers trust him. But the pain has gotten worse. It starts as a dull throb that wakes him at 4 in the morning. Then it becomes sharp stabbing, impossible to ignore. By early January, Klaus can barely walk from the bedroom to the kitchen. He cannot work, cannot lift, cannot bend without gasping. Anna has been patient for 19 years, but now she puts her foot down. You need surgery, no more waiting, no more pretending you are fine. Klaus tries to argue. Anna does not let him. They go to the hospital in Heidelberg. The doctor examines him, orders new x-rays, and looks at Klaus with something close to disbelief. How did you live with this for 27 years? Klaus does not have a good answer. You get used to it, he says. You learn to manage. The doctor shakes his head. You need surgery immediately. If you wait any longer, you will be paralyzed within months, maybe weeks. That night, Klaus tells Anna everything. The whole story he has kept inside for nearly 3 decades. The Soviet labor camp, the beatings, the 15-day march. Otto Hartmann pulling him to his feet when the SS guard was about to shoot him, arriving in America with 3 crushed vertebrae. The American doctors offering surgery that he refused out of fear. Anna listens without interrupting. When he finishes, she is quiet for a long time. Then she asks, "Why did you not tell me?" Klaus says, "I thought carrying it alone was strength." Anna takes his hand. Strength is trusting the people who love you. Klaus agrees to the surgery. It is the same procedure he was offered in 1945. Spinal fusion with metal rods. The risks are higher now because he is older. 30% chance of complications. But doing nothing guarantees paralysis. He thinks about Margaret, about wanting to walk her down the aisle someday, about wanting to hold grandchildren, about all the years he has left and whether he wants to spend them in a wheelchair. The surgery happens in February, 6 hours on the operating table. When Klaus wakes, the first thing he does is wiggle his toes. They move. He can feel them. No paralysis. The pain is different now. Surgical pain, sharp and immediate, but not the deep chronic ache he has carried since 1945. Within 2 weeks, something remarkable happens. Klaus stands up from his hospital bed and realizes the constant pressure in his lower back is gone. For the first time in 27 years, he stands straight without pain shooting up his spine. He cries. The nurses think it is from the medication or the stress of recovery. But Klaus is crying because he forgot what this felt like. Forgot what it was like to exist in a body that does not hurt all the time. He goes home in March. The recovery is slow, but every day is better than the one before. By April, he is walking around the neighborhood. By May, he is back in his workshop doing light carpentry. And then the letter arrives. It comes on a Tuesday morning. The return address says St. Louis, Missouri, United States of America. Klaus's hands shake as he opens it. Dear Klaus, the letter begins. After all these years, I found your address through hospital records. My husband, Robert, passed away last year. Going through his papers, I found your letters from the 1940s and 50s. I am writing because of something extraordinary. Captain Howard Lentz is still alive. He is 75 years old and lives in Kansas. He asks about you sometimes. Klaus, would you ever consider visiting America again? I know it is a lot to ask, but I think it would mean the world to him and to me. Your friend and always Sarah Mitchell Warner. Klaus reads the letter 3 times. He reads it aloud to Anna, his voice breaking. She remembers me after 27 years. Anna says you should go. Klaus says they cannot afford it. Anna says they will find a way. This is his dream. She has known about it for years, even though Klaus never said it directly. She has seen the small American flag hidden in his dresser drawer, the Coca-Cola bottle cap he still carries, the way his face changes when he talks about Sarah and Captain Lentz and the baseball game. That evening, Margaret overhears her parents talking. She is 14 and smart and observant. She has heard pieces of her father's story over the years. The war, the injury, America. But she never understood how much it meant to him. Over the next 6 months, Margaret does something extraordinary. She starts saving money from her part-time job at a bakery. She enlists her grandparents, her aunt and uncle, family friends. She tells them about her father's dream, about the Americans who saved him, about how he has never stopped wanting to return. By September, she has enough for a plane ticket. On Klaus's 45th birthday, Margaret gives him an envelope. Inside is a ticket to New York and a note. Papa, you are going to America. We all want this for you. Klaus cannot speak. He pulls his daughter into his arms and cries into her hair. When he can finally talk, he says, Otto gave me life. Sarah gave me hope. America gave me a second chance. Now you give me wings. In late September of 1972, Klaus boards a Lufthansa flight from Frankfurt to New York. It is his first time on an airplane. He sits by the window and watches Germany disappear beneath the clouds. The last time he saw America, he was 18 years old, a prisoner being transported to St. Louis. Now he is 45, a free man returning to thank the people who changed his life. The plane lands at JFK Airport. Klaus steps into the terminal and is overwhelmed by the size, the noise, the sheer abundance of everything. America is even bigger than he remembered. He takes a domestic flight to Kansas City. On the plane, a flight attendant offers him a Coca-Cola. Klaus smiles and says yes. When she brings the bottle, he holds it for a moment before drinking. 27 years since the baseball game. 27 years since Jimmy from Wisconsin said, "Welcome to America, kid." Klaus drinks the Coca-Cola and feels like he is coming home. Captain Howard Lentz lives on a small farm outside of Kansas City. The house is simple, surrounded by fields and a few horses. When Klaus pulls up in a rental car, Lentz is on the porch waiting. He is 75 now, white-haired and thinner than Klaus remembers, but his eyes are the same, kind and steady. Klaus gets out of the car. They look at each other across the yard. Then Lentz says, Klaus. Klaus nods. Captain Lentz. They meet in the middle and embrace. Two men who have not seen each other in 26 years, who come from different worlds but are connected by a moment of compassion in a Kansas prison camp during the final days of a terrible war. Lentz's wife, Margaret, watches from the doorway, wiping her eyes. They sit on the porch and talk for hours. Linz wants to know everything. Klaus's family, his work, his life. Klaus tells him about Anna and Margareta, about the carpentry business, about finally getting the surgery. Linz listens and nods. Then he says, I kept your x-rays. Do you want to see them? Klaus says yes. Linz brings out the films from 1945. They hold them up to the afternoon sun. Klaus has brought his post-surgery x-rays from 1972. They compare them side by side, broken and healed. Linz says, look at that. You did it. You survived. Klaus says, we did it. Together. They talk about Otto Hartmann. Klaus shows Linz the pocket watch that Otto's widow gave him when he visited Berlin in 1950. He wears it every day. Linz says he tried to find Otto. He is sorry he could not save him. Klaus shakes his head. You did save him. You made his sacrifice matter. Because you cared for me. Otto's kindness rippled forward. Later they walk through the fields. Klaus moves carefully but without the constant pain. Linz notices, you are walking better than I expected. Klaus tells him about the surgery, about carrying the injury for 27 years because he was afraid, about finally trusting doctors again. Linz stops walking and looks at Klaus. You know what the real miracle is? Not that you survived with that injury, but that you let yourself heal. That takes more courage than enduring pain. Klaus has never thought about it that way. But Linz is right. The next day, Klaus flies to St. Louis. Sarah Warner is waiting at the airport. She is 53 now, her dark hair streaked with gray, but her smile is exactly the same. When she sees Klaus, she gasps. Oh my God. Klaus, they hug for a long time. People in the airport walk around them annoyed at the obstruction, but neither of them cares. Sarah drives Klaus through St. Louis. They go to the old military hospital, now converted to a VA center. They walk to the field where the baseball game happened. It is overgrown now, but Klaus can still see where the bases were. This is where I learned to laugh again, he tells Sarah. They sit in a diner booth. Sarah orders 2 Coca-Colas. When they arrive, she raises her bottle. To Otto, to recovery, to second chances. Klaus touches his bottle to hers. To American kindness that changed my life. They talk for hours. Sarah tells him about her late husband, a teacher she met in 1951. They had a good marriage, 2 children, 4 grandchildren. But she never forgot Klaus or the summer of 1945 when a German prisoner taught her that hatred was easy and compassion was brave. Klaus gives her something he made in his workshop. A wooden box hand-carved with intricate detail. Inside is a carving of the hospital room, the baseball field, and a Coca-Cola bottle. The inscription reads, to Sarah who showed me freedom. Thank you, Klaus, Sarah cries. She says she will treasure it forever. Then Sarah tells Klaus she has a surprise. She called Anna last week. They have been planning something. The next day, Klaus goes to the airport to pick up Margareta. She is on a flight from Frankfurt sent by Anna, with the last of their savings and contributions from the extended family. Anna wanted Margaret to see her father's America, to understand what shaped him. When Margaret walks through the arrival gate, Klaus cannot believe it. His daughter, here, in America. They spend 2 weeks together, father and daughter exploring the country that saved Klaus's life. They drive to the Grand Canyon. Margaret stands at the edge and stares at the vast emptiness. Klaus says, this is freedom, Margaret. Space to breathe, space to dream, space to become anything you want. They go to Texas and visit the ranch owned by Sergeant Bill Thompson's grandson. Thompson himself passed away in 1968, but his family remembers the German prisoners. They remember how Thompson insisted on feeding them properly, treating them with dignity. The grandson teaches Margaret to ride a horse. Klaus watches his daughter gallop across the Texas plains and feels something break open in his chest. Joy. Pure and uncomplicated. That evening, sitting on the porch watching the sunset, Margaret asks Papa, why does America mean so much to you? Klaus thinks about how to answer. Finally, he says, because when everyone else saw an enemy, Americans saw a person. That is a gift I can never repay. They drive to New York City, Times Square, the Empire State Building, and there on a massive billboard, a Coca-Cola advertisement. Klaus points to it. See that? That symbol meant hope to me. Still does. Margaret looks at her father, this quiet man who rarely talks about his feelings, and she sees tears in his eyes. She says, Papa, it is just soda. Klaus shakes his head. No Liebling. It is a symbol of a nation that treated enemies with dignity. That is worth more than gold. On their last night in America, Margaret asks if they can watch a baseball game. They go to a Cardinals game in St. Louis. Klaus explains every rule with passion. He knows them all by heart, learned during that summer of 1945. During the seventh inning stretch, everyone stands and sings, "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." Klaus sings along, still remembers every word. Margaret is amazed. "Papa, how do you know this song?" "I learned it when I learned to be free." On the flight back to Germany, Margaret tells Klaus she wants to live in America someday. Klaus says she should. "This country gave me a second life. Maybe it will give you a first one that is truly yours." Then Margaret says something that Klaus will remember forever. "And maybe someday, Papa, you will be buried here, in the place that healed you." Klaus looks at his daughter and nods slowly. Maybe. The years that follow are good ones. Klaus's pain is manageable now. He works into his 60s. He and Anna travel occasionally. They visit Margaret when she moves to Boston in 1980 for graduate school. She marries an American man and settles in Virginia. Klaus writes to Sarah and Linz every year. Christmas cards, updates, photographs. In 1990, he and Anna visit Margaret and meet their two grandchildren. They spend 3 months in America, and Klaus shows Anna all the places that mattered. Kansas, St. Louis, Texas. Anna finally understands. She sees the way Americans greet Point Klaus, the way veterans shake his hand when they learn his story, the way he belongs here in a way he never quite belonged anywhere else. In 1993, Captain Howard Linz passes away at the age of 86. Klaus flies to Kansas for the funeral. He delivers a eulogy that reduces the congregation to tears. "Captain Linz showed me that true strength is compassion. True courage is kindness to those who cannot repay it. He treated me with dignity when he had every reason not to." That changed everything. Klaus places an American flag on Linz's grave. Then he does something he has never done before. He salutes. A German carpenter saluting an American doctor who saved his life 50 years ago. By the spring of 1998, Klaus is 71 years old and his heart is failing. The doctors say there is nothing more they can do. He has months, maybe weeks. Klaus is moved to a nursing home near Heidelberg. Anna visits every day. Margaret flies from Virginia and stays for 2 weeks. One afternoon, Klaus asks Margaret to sit with him. He has something important to say. "I want to be buried in America." Margaret is surprised. "Papa, you are German. Your family is here." Klaus shakes his head. "I was born German, but I became human in America. My soul belongs there, with Otto's spirit, with the people who showed me grace." Margaret promises she will honor his wish. Klaus spends his final weeks writing letters. To Anna, to Margaret, to his grandchildren, and one final letter that he seals and tells Margaret to read at his funeral. He writes about the labor camp, the march, Otto saving him, arriving in America expecting cruelty and finding kindness instead, Sarah teaching him to heal, the baseball game, the Coca-Cola, all of it. But the core of the letter is this: America saved me twice. First from death, second from hatred. I learned that nations do not define people. Values do. Freedom, dignity, and second chances are universal. Take care of Sarah. Visit Linz's grave. Remember Otto, and always, always believe in goodness. On a quiet morning in June of 1998, Klaus Zimmermann passes away. Anna is holding his hand. Margaret is reading to him from a book. His last words are, "Tell Sarah thank you. Tell her I found Otto. He is waiting for me." Then he is gone. True to her promise, Margaret arranges for Klaus to be buried in Kansas. There is a small cemetery near where Captain Linz is buried. The funeral is held on a warm day in July. The turnout is extraordinary. Sarah is there now, 78 and in a wheelchair, but determined to attend. The grandchildren of Sergeant Bill Thompson come. Former prisoners Klaus stayed in touch with over the years. American veterans who knew Linz. Strangers who read about Klaus's story in the local newspaper. And someone unexpected. A woman in her 60s who introduces herself as Otto Hartmann's granddaughter. She flew from Berlin to represent the family. She places a flower on Klaus's casket and reads a letter from Otto's daughter. "Klaus kept his promise to my father. He lived a life worthy of the sacrifice. By honoring my father, Klaus honored all who choose kindness over cruelty. Sarah gives the eulogy. Her voice is weak but clear. I met Klaus when he was a broken boy full of pain and propaganda. I watched him transform into a kind man, a devoted father, and a bridge between nations. He taught me that healing does not come from revenge. It comes from choosing to see humanity in everyone. Klaus never forgot what America gave him, and he spent 50 years paying it forward. That is the American dream. Not wealth, not fame, second chances. Margaret reads from Klaus's final letter. She reads about American values and Otto's legacy and Sarah's impact. She ends with, "My father wanted you to know that one act of kindness can change a life." Captain Lintz's care, Sarah's compassion, even a Coca-Cola from a soldier, they all mattered. They proved that in the darkest times, choosing humanity is what separates civilization from barbarism. The American Legion members asked permission to drape an American flag over Klaus's casket. Margaret says yes. They perform a 21-gun salute, honorary recognition for contributions to German-American relations. Klaus Zimmermann, who arrived in America as an enemy prisoner, is laid to rest with military honors in American soil. Years pass. Margaret visits the grave every summer. She brings her children and later her grandchildren. She tells them about Opa Klaus, about the labor camp and the march and Otto pulling him to his feet, about arriving in America with a broken spine and finding people who chose to heal rather than harm. In 2015, Margaret brings her 12-year-old grandson to the cemetery. He looks at the gravestone and asks why Opa is buried in America instead of Germany. Margaret tells him the whole story. The boy listens wide-eyed. "So America saved him?" the boy asks. Margaret shakes her head gently. "No, darling. Americans saved him. People who chose kindness." After visiting the grave, they go to a diner. Margaret orders Coca-Colas for everyone. It is a tradition now. She raises her bottle in a toast. To Opa Klaus, to Otto, to Captain Lintz, to Sarah, to second chances. The grandchildren do not fully understand yet, but they drink, they participate in the ritual, and someday they will understand what it means. In 2018, a historian researching war crimes trials discovers Klaus Zimmermann's testimony in declassified War Department archives. Klaus's account, combined with 16 other prisoners, helped convict SS Captain Werner Kruger in 1947. Klaus never knew his words sent a war criminal to justice. The information was kept confidential. The historian writes an article. Klaus Zimmermann's words mattered. His life proved reconciliation was possible. His legacy lives on, and it does, in ways both large and small. In the carpentry shop in Heidelberg that still bears his name. In the scholarship fund Margaret established for exchange students. In the wooden box Sarah kept until she died in 2003 and left to a museum. In the letters archived at the Holocaust Memorial Museum. In the grandchildren who drink Coca-Cola and remember. But perhaps the greatest legacy is simpler than all of that. It is the proof that one person's choice to show kindness can ripple forward through generations. That treating an enemy as a human being can change not just one life, but countless others. Klaus Zimmermann arrived in America as an enemy. He left as a friend, he returned as family. And he rests there still in Kansas soil beneath an American flag, surrounded by people who chose compassion over hatred and proved that the best of America lives not in its strength, but in its generosity of spirit. The broken spine healed. But more importantly, the broken spirit was made whole. And that happened because a few Americans in Kansas decided that even enemies deserve humanity. That is the American story worth remembering. That is the legacy worth preserving. That is what Klaus Zimmermann understood when he asked to be buried in the land that saved him. Not because America is perfect, but because it dares to believe in ideals worth striving for. Freedom, dignity, the unshakable conviction that everyone deserves a second chance. Klaus got his second chance. He used it well. And in doing so, he became living proof that kindness is never wasted, that mercy is always worth giving, and that the simple act of treating someone with respect can echo across decades and oceans and generations. In a small cemetery in Kansas, there is a gravestone that reads Klaus Zimmermann, 1927 to 1998. German soldier, American friend. He learned that freedom lives in hearts, not borders. Every summer, his family visits. They place flowers. They tell stories. They drink Coca-Cola in his memory. And on certain quiet evenings, when the wind blows just right across the Kansas plains, you can almost hear the crack of a baseball bat, the laughter of young men playing a game, and the voice of an 18-year-old boy discovering that the world is more beautiful and more kind than he ever imagined possible. That is Klaus Zimmermann's America. And it is still here waiting for us to remember what it means.